folks, welcome back. I'm looking at Foodie Beauty's Chantal's Astrological Birth Chart. Now, something I should note is that we don't have the time of her birth, and so that leaves out a lot of information. However, the information that we do have with just her location and her date of birth gives us a lot of information. So there's some missing stuff such as houses and such as her ascendant and descendant. But there's still a lot of information, important information to be gleaned from this. So I'm going to put a copy of her birth chart up on the screen. You can pause it, take a look at it for yourself if you enjoy looking at those kinds of things, or you can listen to me talk about it. So I'm going to flip over to my other window, and I'm going to take a look at some really important aspects. One of the most important aspects I noticed was an aspect pattern called the cradle. This is a pattern that gives a person a lot of space to be very comfortable in life. It gives them a shield in the sense that an uncomfortable situation arises and they can push away. Now, Chantal has this between her moon in Aquarius, her Neptune in Capricorn, and between her Mercury in Aries and her Pluto in Scorpio. Okay, so her moon in Aquarius kind of gives her that very impulsive edge. It's not just her sun in Aries that gives her that impulsive, burn out the flame, conflagration kind of energy. She can, kind of like a baby would, and kind of what you would expect from a cradle aspect pattern, kind of goes, wah, I want this. No, now I want that, and throws her toys out of the crib kind of thing. Very, like a very emotionally sudden, rebellious kind of individual, and people have catered to that. This particular cradle aspect pattern, that kind of emotionality shields herself, especially her family has fueled that shielding, and from what I can see, there's still some of that goes on between her and her family to this day, and between her and people like Pete's, for instance, okay? Now, the Neptune in Capricorn is another aspect that contributes to this whole feed me, take care of me, shield me. This whole kind of pattern already, you kind of expect a kind of childlike feeling around these kinds of people. These kinds of people escape responsibility because, oh, they're just a girl, they're just a boy, they didn't mean that kind of thing. And Chantal has taken advantage of this pretty repeatedly and egregiously, okay? Neptune and Capricorn, they should be grounded, but she has kind of an idealized understanding of authority figures, for instance, and of also not just authority figures, but money. She has like she puts money on too high of on a pedestal. She takes advantage of it in ways that suit her. And she's kind of loosey-goosey with that cash. It gets her what she wants, therefore she feels protected from things that would normally get other people, okay? Whenever people say, why isn't karma getting her? First of all, right now it is, okay? But in the past, it's not just karma that's protected her and doesn't seem to get away, doesn't seem to get her, right? It's this cradle aspect pattern that really kind of dominates this particular chart. Her moon in Aquarius, that changeability, also has a favorable pattern or a favorable aspect between Mercury in Aries and itself, moon in Aquarius, okay? So she's a very sudden kind of emotional person, very rebellious, and so she talks in such a way that all attention is on her with that Mercury in Aries, okay? So, pay attention to me. And we've seen this displayed in multiple ways, and I should say that this is a tendency that she had the moment that she was born. A lot of this is that she just kind of floats through life unthinking, and we'll talk about her true note here in just a second. It has something to do with this. But she gets attention because she's loud, because she talks fast, for instance. She makes herself the center of attention, And then there's that kind of sudden rebelliousness. Now all attention is on me with that moon in Aquarius. Very sudden, changeable kind of thing. I keep getting that rebellious, and I'm sorry to keep repeating that, but there's a lot of, I'm sure that she was a hellion when she was a teenager. I'm not surprised that mom gave her up temporarily to the foster system when she was a teenager. Her family couldn't handle her after a certain point, right? I don't get from this whole cradle aspect that she was very disciplined, that anyone really, did any timeouts or anything like that. I feel like they kind of fed her and told her to go away. Not how you raise a kid. And yeah. Anyway, this Neptune in Capricorn has a positive relationship with the Pluto in Scorpio. Now, Pluto in Scorpio is a really, really powerful transit because Pluto is in its natal sign of Scorpio in this particular case. This was a really difficult time period for a lot of people who were living through the AIDS crisis, for instance. We'll talk more about what Pluto and Scorpio has for Chantal specifically, but this is partly where FFG and people like FFG consistently pop up. I'll talk more about that in just a second. But whenever she starts to have responsibility come her way with that Pluto and Scorpio, whenever consequences start to roll that way, that's when she kind of escapes with money, with authority figures. People protect her because, once again, we come back to that baby in the cradle kind of childishness. It protects her. The stars that she was born under have protected her, but up to a certain point. Here's the big stuff, the great big opposer, which is very dominant in this particular chart. Between her Mercury in Aries and between her Pluto and Scorpio, this is where her mouth repeatedly lands her in very deep, serious trouble. Remember that Pluto is Hades, is the god of the underworld. Persephone just came to mind, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. You can see that Mars is in Scorpio too. Persephone's connected here when we talk about sexual assault. But back to that Mercury in Aries with that opposition with Pluto and Scorpio. She can talk herself into some really shitty corners. And we've discussed how, during Crackhead Olympics 1.0, how at least FFG said her body can take a beating. She can put her body through a lot of shit, and somehow she still comes out on the other side. Part of that is the cradle saving her, but Chantal puts herself in these kinds of situations because her mouth just runs. She wants to be the center of attention, even if it's horrific attention. Okay? The cradle aspect pattern is a very powerful one in Chantal's and Foodie Beauty's life, and it's protected her from a lot of circumstances up until now. So let's talk about her Mars in Scorpio. This is something about sex. And we've talked before I just finished talking about how Chantal has a lot of sexual fetishes that normal people are not willing to discuss or satisfy with her. And that Koki was pretty much the only one who was willing to do so with a price. It was his way to collect information and money from her, because she didn't want it out, and he knew it would be useful blackmail. I see that here with Mars and Scorpio. This also talks about her being very into degradation, humiliation, taboo stuff that a lot of us would get grossed out by. She's into that stuff, and I feel like there is the real risk that what she's into could come out later on once Crackhead Olympics 2.0 really starts to take off. Okay, she's into some really dark, deep shit. And along those same lines of talking about Persephone, there's a part of her that finds being, we'll say, ravished. She finds being ravished very appealing. Okay, and like I was saying earlier, a lot of normies I should say, aren't going to be into the stuff that she's into, because this is deep, dark stuff. This is a very secretive, can be a very secretive kind of person. This is someone who lashes out very easily with that Mars in Scorpio. She has no problem going on the warpath. And that it has a squaring relationship, a tense relationship with the moon in Aquarius. So suddenly she'll change things up on her partner, on her sexual fetish partner, and that might land her into more hot water. With all this Pluto and Scorpio energy, I haven't even gotten into how Saturn appears in Scorpio right here. She's someone who has repeatedly landed herself into some really shitty situations, and she doesn't talk about it because it's humiliating for her. So her mouth repeatedly gets her into trouble. Her sudden bursts of emotions get her into a lot of trouble with the people that she does, if you can call it that, sexual role plays with. We can also talk about her Saturn in Scorpio. So these are people who are stronger than her, who do have some degree of authority because they have been through more in life, because they've learned life lessons. Because of this cradle aspect pattern in her chart, there's the possibility that she never truly grows up, ever. Even if she were to live well into her elder years, there's going to be a part of her that's always going to be extra childish. And when she encounters somebody who has that kind of Scorpio energy somewhere in their chart, like with FFG, for instance, it's something that holds her attention. They become a mysterious, deep, dark individual for her. And FFG, I should say, and other people who have that powerful Scorpio energy just attract Chantal. She's like a moth to flame with these people. And as much pain as she gives them, they give her pain right the fuck back. Saturn is not an easy planet to deal with, and most especially not with Scorpio. This would have been a rough growing up kind of thing that she would have dealt with her Saturn return in Scorpio. I suspect that she went through a number of sexual situations that were deeply painful for her. Now, whether or not she learned, I'm going to say that she didn't learn her lesson because we know her pretty well. I feel like I'm like waist deep into her lore. I'm not like neck deep, okay? But I feel like she's gone through a number of situations that when I see how that Saturn in Scorpio has a positive-ish relationship with her Venus in Pisces, she feel like whatever happened during her Saturn return made her feel like a woman. Right? It gave her a very idealized image of herself and her femininity, even while it was a deeply punishing one. There is the possibility that she was sexually assaulted while she was going through her Saturn return, or that she sexually assaulted somebody else. There may have been someone considerably younger than her that she took sexual advantage of, and that was an opportunity for her to learn a lesson, and she didn't. But it gave her a sense of power, unfortunately. Okay? She does have her sun in Aries, and it's very much a me first, look at me, and with all this other information in her chart, it gives the sense that all attention is good attention for her. Now with her Chiron, it's interesting. That appears in Taurus. There is no amount of financial security, any foundation, which finances might give her. There's nothing that's ever going to satisfy this particular person. She's always going to be wanting more. It's never going to be enough, unfortunately. And there's nothing that, like, you know what? It's relatively close to her, and it's not conjunct, I don't believe. It's relatively close to her true node in Gemini. Ideally, she was supposed to have intellectualized her way out of this feeling of nothing I ever earn is ever going to be enough. No amount of money, no amount of security is ever going to be enough to make me feel truly secure. It was her responsibility, it has been her responsibility, to develop her mind in such a way that she doesn't feel like she needs money all the time to make her truly, truly secure. She's not the kind of person to think deeply. In fact, I kind of think sometimes that she's kind of allergic to thinking deeply for long periods of time. Whenever she's given space to try to think deeply, she does something to distract herself. Because remember, cradle aspect, she's a baby. Whether we like it or not, okay? I do see that her Uranus in Sagittarius is about suddenly expanding in more ways than one. I should say that Sagittarians tend to have large butts, and with that Uranus, or large bodies even, and with that Uranus in Sagittarius, I get the feeling that she's the kind of person to have gained weight suddenly, and we've seen that on camera once she went over to Kuwait, right? It has that Uranus in Sagittarius has a tense relationship with her Venus in Pisces. So she has a very idealized idea of what it means for her to be feminine. And what she sees in the mirror is not how things actually are. This is a kind of body dysphoria. And we already know this, okay? So take this as confirmation. These are how the stars were aligned when she was born. This was predicted when she was born, that she was going to struggle with weight gain and sudden weight gain at that, and that it was going to affect how she saw herself as a feminine person. Also, remember how she suddenly shaved off her head? It was probably something that she had been gathering energy towards for quite some time. But that suddenly doing it on camera, I would absolutely expect to see that with a Uranus and Sagittarius, with that having a tense squaring relationship with Venus in Pisces. A lot of feminine people hold their hair in, and a lot of people, regardless of gender, but especially with feminine folk, they tend to hold their hair in high esteem. And even though she had that moment where she was kind of a little bit excited to just let it go and not use the hair fibers anymore, there's still a part of this with that squaring aspect that stung when it actually happened, okay? Neptune and Jupiter in Capricorn have a tense squaring relationship, and they are close to one another. So this is Neptune and Jupiter, quick expansion of, or having a very unclear view of money, of people in authority over, and also of situations that are out of her control, right? These are the situations that not everybody can affect, no matter how good you are or no matter what kind of progress you tend to make. She was never able to get a firm grasp on what it was that she needed to do improve. So she was just kind of like, fuck it, right? And you kind of get that energy with her to this day, right? Right now, she's kind of being tight-lipped about whatever it is going on behind scenes. But I expect that isn't the case. And I also feel like she's the kind to burst at the seams. She wants to talk about this, but there's something holding her back. Capricorn is often associated with male energy, and pretty consistently she's had male father figures in her life who have stopped her. There's been, Neo Tarot has discussed how Salah's father has basically told Chantal not to come back to Kuwait. And that's a situation that she cannot ignore, nor can she affect nor manipulate. And that Neptune makes things it makes it a tough relationship for her. She wants to affect things. Remember, she's come up relatively recently as the bear in my Lenormand card spread. She likes to be the dominant figure, but she can't get away from how she isn't. That Neptune is all about, I can be, but then the reality of Capricorn comes in and says, no, actually you can't. And when Capricorn really gets into the swing of things, it knocks Neptune out of the park. And Jupiter, and that's Zeus, and Kronos. Kronos is Zeus's father. Once those two get into play, there's not much in that particular part of her birth chart that she can really conquer. Then it really is the authority figures, the father figures in her life who have the most power, whether they actually want to be her father figure or not. So there is more that we could take apart in this particular birth chart. Unfortunately, we don't have her time of birth, so it does influence how much information is in this birth chart. What we have here is pretty powerful. And it lends credence to all the way back in 1984 when she was born. All of this, here are the faults in her stars, right? This was not set in stone, but these tendencies were very, very powerful from a very early age, and she has consistently chosen to not rise to her best or highest self, and there will be consequences to pay for that. Capricorn will see to it, and it will be a very, very powerful expansion. One more thing. Her Jupiter in Capricorn has another squaring relationship with her Sun in Aries. Basically, these two very powerful gods, if you will, are going to stamp out the war god. The Aries, the war god, has nothing on these two incredibly powerful figures. She cannot get around this. And this is very much based on her reputation. It's humiliating. It's embarrassing when father figures, when authority figures get one over her, or so she feels, right? Again, we come to that baby kind of feel in the cradle aspect. She can't get away from this. She's too emotionally immature, and she hates it. Okay, if you want to discuss this astro chart, I love discussion around astro charts. Please come talk to me in the comment section down below. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching.